We're in the final run here, but we're going to hear about Dido's secret committee.
Well, no, please forgive the commercial analogy. Legally, we can't merge I and E. Legally, we can't have one chair, we can't have one chief exec. What we can do is we can do some things together.
Well, Malcolm Grant's going soon, isn't he? You could be chair of both.
No,
that would
legally,
I'll apply for the job.
You should.
Yeah.
So
you heard that.
This won't be my call. So we can't. Whether we should or not, we can't. But what we can do is look to collaborate. So we have done a couple of things. So firstly, we've made some cross-border appointments. These need to be associate appointments because of the regulatory powers that Monitor has, and etc. So David Roberts, the Deputy Chairman of NHS England, is coming onto my board, attended his first board meeting 2 weeks ago. And Richard Douglas, the NHS Improvement Deputy Chairman, is joining the NHS England board. He's just attended his first board. And the two of them are going to chair, or are chairing, a advisory committee, a joint finance committee. Because where there is, I know, real tension is with the money. And we've got to find a means of resolving that rather than pushing that down into the regions and the local communities and say, you sort it out because we haven't got a means to.
And what about, sorry, just to add to the issue, what about, where does social care fit in that? Because we've got a kind of squeeze going on, haven't we? We've got, at the bottom end, we're saying to people, you've all got to work together, social services and all the rest of it, you've all got to join hands and pray for a cure. And then at the top end, we've got these disparate organisations.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And, and the Department of Health is now Department of Health Plus. Although what all that means, I don't know if they bring in any money across or whatever. I mean, we have to recognise that at the top.
Yeah.
If the squeeze is on at the bottom.
Someone quite sort of cheekily said to me a few months back, what we need done, it was an STP of the ALBs.
Yes.
At the time I didn't speak fluent health three-letter acronym. What on earth does that mean? But actually I think what we do, I've come into this, I naturally believe that collaboration is the way that you get stuff done anyway. Yeah. And this may seem strange to people who've not worked in the private sector, but actually I ran a challenger business that I was regularly on the Today programme bashing BT over the head, but actually I had a couple of really effective joint ventures with BT and I've got some very good friends there and we could both compete and collaborate. And I think I've come into this believing that at the centre we have to role model a chunk of the behaviours that we're asking people in local communities to do, which is to learn how to do that. We don't need to be one organisation, but we can work out where it makes more sense to do things once, where it makes sense for one of us to do something and the other to trust the other body to do it, and where actually we should carry on as we've been with completely separate activities. And we've been very public about that. We've kicked off a piece of work with NHS England to define that, because the people who work in both England and Improvement know that we're currently trying to support and challenge the system doesn't work. And we need to improve our own act if we're going to help you improve yours.
Well, look at Simon's endgame is pretty clear. It's we mustn't call them accountable care organisations anymore, but integrated, conglomerated, super duper, whatever they
I didn't have a nickname for them.
Christ knows what they call it. Anyway, I don't know. I think I've got the early onset of something horrible. I can't remember this anymore. But it's pretty clear, isn't it? If we're going to have vertically integrated care, horizontally integrated, however you want to put it, population-based budgets, capitated budgets, agreed outcomes, then commissioning finds itself in a very difficult space. That isn't to say that there isn't a role for some kind of definition of what care we want to produce in some way, but the whole structure, really, of the end game is quite different to the structures now.
Well, remember I have got 4 months health experience, so now I'm not an expert in this, but what I hear from people is that if you think of the endgame as an impressionistic painting, people are pretty agreed on the direction of travel. If you want to turn it into an engineering spec to really define how, there are different parts of the country at different stages.
I used to run one. It was called a district health authority in 1980.
But I look forward, not back. I think that there will be stuff that we take. Sorry, I didn't. But what I meant was, I don't.
No, I'm not talking to you.
There you go. What I
Salt.
meant was, I think it's very tempting to look back and say, oh, you're recreating something of the past. I think what we've got to do is take. There is undoubtedly some good in what has happened over the last decade in the NHS. Some of those tensions are not bad. That's my point about the sort of my commercial experience, where it is possible to have tension and collaboration, and that's a much more mature version of a integrated care system than just one big organisation. And that's why I say I don't think we've all worked out exactly how that works, including how we regulate it. We're all learning how to do that. And by the way, this is not a NHS only problem. This is a global one. It's how do we tackle what you really brilliantly summarised, which is that health demand is growing faster than GDP of developed nations. So we have got to work together on how we find more integrated pathways that work for patients, that are more affordable, if we're then going to go to the nation, as I'm sure that we need to set out why health and social care does deserve more of our money.
Well, I mean, with your background, there's a technology thing as well. I mean, I'm not actually so gloomy about the future. I mean, there are a cadre of people coming through of my mum's generation and slightly after who are frail, have had poor diets, bad experiences, smokers and all the rest of it. But the baby boomers coming through have not. They haven't smoked. They've had good diets. They've had good jobs. They're net savvy. They book everything online. They will expect. They'll give us a problem in a different way because the expectations will be different. People of that generation will say, "Why the hell can't I do this online? Why the hell can't I use FaceTime? Look what's happened with Babylon in London. Babylon have signed up 8,000 people, and that's 8,000 or 8,000 people from GP practices outside that have lost their 147 quid for looking after them. So it's very disruptive.
Well, this is a space that obviously I've come from in terms of technology. I think I take the view that the digital revolution, fourth industrial revolution, whatever you call it, is every bit as significant to society as the early industrial revolution was 150 years ago. And we're only in the foothills. We're only just beginning to see the changes that digital tech is going to drive in society. The technology itself is morally neutral. It's what people do with it that drives whether it's good or bad for society. And I think there's a lot of parallels in how Britain navigated the first industrial revolution. So if you cast your mind back, unfettered capitalism in the early industrial age was not a nice thing. That's what led to the birth of the union movement. That's why Marx and Engels wrote Das Kapital. It's the beginnings. It was the beginnings of proper enfranchisement.
But it did give us but he gave us Cadbury and Sunlight.
Well,
the Quakers.
Oh, it did,
and
precisely because society,
and
Britain reacted.
Yes.
And what we did, it was not preordained that the UK, a relatively small nation, should emerge through the first industrial revolution as one of the wealthiest nations in the world. It was because we managed that societal change.
Do you think we do that again?
Well, that's what all of us have got to try and work out how to do. And I think one of the things you learn is that running away from the tech won't work. The technology will go somewhere else. So the Ottoman Empire is the best example of people who tried that. In the 1400s, the Ottoman Sultan at the time forbade the production of printing presses in Arabic. 300 years, no printing presses in Arabic in the Ottoman Empire, so the literacy rate was 3 to 4% 300 years later, compared to 50 to 60% in Western Europe. And all the benefits that came with literacy didn't come to the Ottoman Empire. It didn't stop the tech. So and there are lots of examples like that. So stopping the technology won't work. But just assuming that we'd all be unambiguously good also won't work.
A bit later with Luther and printing.
Indeed.
That's with the church.
So working through how we make sure, and I'm in danger of sounding a bit Tory-like if I'm not careful, how you genuinely make it work for everyone. That's the real challenge. I think not of politicians, but of all of us.
Everyone will make it work for them. I think.
And in the NHS, we need to work out how to do that.
I think the public have already decided. A lot of the public have already decided they've given up with GPs. They want to do Babylon. 8,000 people.
Well, but the thing I know is that the caring. I talk about this a lot in the House of Lords with my other sort of digital tech hat on. Is that technology is going to remove a lot of jobs. but it's going to create a whole load more. And the need, as if we're living in this world, I think we will be, where we're all living longer, the need for caring jobs is going to grow, not decline. There'll be different caring jobs to the ones we have today.
Isn't it
Being
true
a doctor or a nurse is going to be different in 10 or 20
by
years' time.
2025, if every school leaver became a carer, we still wouldn't have enough care.
Well, and therefore we're going to need to harness the power of technology. And no one working in care should be worried about their job. Quite the opposite. We need to make it sexy and exciting for people to want to work in health and social care.
Listen, I've got my eye on the time. Well, I want to leave time for the questions at the end, but I'm just dying to know. Tell us about this. How did you manage to con your bank manager to lend you £5,000 to buy a horse?
Well, it's 7 actually.
Even
more important because I had
what was
very
that all
understanding.
about?
So for people who don't know, my real claim to fame is that when I came back from Harvard, I was 24. I had a big old overdraft, and because I'd had a good time at Harvard Business School, and I persuaded my bank manager, a chap called Ron Barnes from Barclays, to give me an extra £7,000 to buy a racehorse. Because I grew up on a farm, I'd ridden all my life, I'd been a not very good amateur jockey. And she said yes, and I bought this horse called Cool Dawn. And Cool Dawn was a 5-year-old for me to ride in amateur races. And I bought him because everyone thought that he jumped well, he would be safe, he wouldn't kill the stupid amateur girl, but he was never going to be that brilliant. It turned out that he was that brilliant. He's 30 now, he lives at home, and 20 years ago, almost to the day, he won the Cheltenham Gold Cup. Which is a complete fairy tale. There's someone in here who had some money on it. And no, it's not meant to happen. And my sport, jump racing, produces these ridiculous stories from time to time. Oh yes, I rode as an amateur for 20 years. All the money that Dawn won was sort of invested in other horses, because the thing I'd always wanted to do was ride round Aintree, around the Grand National course, which I have done once, and if you told me I could do it again in 2 weeks' time, I'd be there. Sadly, I'm definitely too old to do that anymore.
Have you got a tip for the National?
Well, keep your money in your pocket. It's the best.
Okay, has anybody got any questions? Well, anything on Twitter, Terry? What are we? Where are we?
Well, people are phenomenally impressed with the way that you handled.
Right.
No, you. I mean, people are very impressed and really, really liking the engagement, the humanity.
Thank you.
That you're bringing.
Is that your husband?
Probably.
No.
Your old man's on
bringing to NHSI, and so really very very
let's
positive.
don't go home thinking I wish I'd have asked the question. So, Jane.
I want to take you back to retail and Terry.
Yeah.
And Terry, when he wasn't sure what to do, used to ask his customers what they wanted. So my question is, I've put this question to a certain QC a few months ago, who played intellectual gymnastics with me with the answer. But my question is, will you ask patients if they would like staff to have legal protection when they're raising concerns about patient safety? Will you do that in the next 6 months? Will you ask patients if they would like staff to have that protection? Because at the moment we don't have any protection.
I mean, we can see it. We know where you're coming from. I mean, the interesting thing about that question is that I think most members of the public will think, "Well, don't you anyway?"
Yes, I think they would.
They will be surprised.
And we don't.
Yes, and we've in fact we've got a guide coming out for managers, just been written by Roger Klein, that is dealing with a lot of these very difficult and thorny. Well, they're not difficult and thorny issues, and I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where you visit hospitals, you see examples of good leadership, and people do this kind of thing, but they're driven into a corner often by. There are 3 things, aren't there? The environment, the history, and the geography that run against so many of these hospitals. So that's a message for you when you go out and talk to people.
Let me take it away. I'm not going to sort of belittle the importance of the question by just giving you a yes or no. I think that would be wrong. I'm with Roy. I think if we went and asked patients, they would say, "Don't you already?" And therefore understanding how we and you have Sir Norman Williams' review that he's taken on after the sort of recent issues, and I think we need to all think really quite carefully how we make people working in the service feel safe to practice, but also how in the end we put the power in the hands of the patients to feel that if something goes wrong, also that they will really properly be heard, as you know, gosh, so much better than anybody.
Because it's not about culture, it's about those serious issues that might have criminology.
I think we have a long journey
I totally agree
with that. And so much of it is the preoccupation with, and I'm not having a go, but it's the preoccupation of running a complicated organisation in an environment where you've got regulators breathing down your neck, delivering that agenda. And it's so easy then to say, to manage along the lines of, look, this, you just go and do this, don't bring me bad news. And then you get bullying down and managing up.
Yeah.
How's it going? Everything's all right, boss. And of course it isn't. And it's that kind of tension that we need to find a way around. Yes, give us a nice question. Give us a happy tune to whistle on the way home.
Okay, thank you, first of all. The second thing is that Roy Griffiths, who I remember very well, did great things for the health service.
Sainsbury's.
Sainsbury's, yes. Yes, okay.
I was around when do you remember his report when it
I
came
remember
out?
very well, yes.
Yes. Do you know the wonderful quote in his report? He said, well, if Florence Nightingale was alive today, she'd be wandering the corridors of the health service with her lamp asking who is in charge. That was in Roy's report. Yeah.
Right, since then, a lot of people in retail who I've admired enormously have come and tried to do what you're trying to do in the NHS and have left disillusioned after 3 or 4 years.
Well, this is what a lot of people said to me when I suggested I might want to do something in the NHS. Let me tell you why I'm here. We haven't really covered that. 18 months ago, I decided it was time to leave my baby Talk, and I discovered through the work I've been doing I'm on the court of the Bank of England and in the Lords, that actually what really got me up in the morning was feeling like I was making a difference to society. So you do that, I'm quite structured, the old McKinsey training. What am I good at? What do I enjoy? Well, I enjoy feeling like I make a real difference in public service. I love what I do in the bank and the Lords. What am I good at? Well, I know how to lead large consumer-facing mass market organisations. I also understand how politics works. I'm not afraid of it. I don't mind taking on the difficult issues. No one can... the Daily Mail have pretty much written all the horrid stuff they could ever write about me, unless I do something stupid, in which case I deserve it. So I don't mind, the difficult issues. So 18 months ago, I could have said, I want to walk towards the sound of gunfire. I want to find the difficult jobs in the public sector where my leadership skills could make a difference. And of course, you do that analysis, and the NHS comes to the top of the list. The most important, one of the largest, politically challenging, because everybody cares about it. And I ran this analysis by lots of people in business who all said, great analysis, you'll really enjoy public service, don't go near the NHS, it'll kill you, just as you've described. And I've come to the conclusion that I'm incredibly lucky. I don't, I've run a business, I've made a chunk of money, not doing this for money. David Cameron gave me the ultimate gold star. I don't need someone to give me a gold star. I need a sense that I'm...
David Cameron giving you a gold star.
Well, I don't need to feel... I need to feel like I'm making a difference. And for as long as I feel like I am, regardless of, what the media write about me, I'll keep doing it. And I think that, whether that's 1, 3, 10 years, the rest of my life, I don't know. But so far, I found the NHS gets under your skin, and once you join, it seems mighty hard to leave, actually, rather than the other way round.
You absolutely do. Yes, sir. Far away. Just tell us who you are, where you work, what your PIN number is, the usual. Oh, you know his PIN number anyway.
You mentioned you clashed with Jeremy Hunt when he was culture secretary over broadband stance.
Yep.
What are your views on him now that you're working on the same side of the fence?
Well, it's a strange position. Being the chair of an arm's length body, I look both ways. In that, my job is in part to ensure the arm's length nature of the arm's length body that I chair, so to challenge, but I'm also the person that the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister have appointed in. So I'm part of both teams, and that's what it feels like to be, I am part of both teams. So I think my job is to challenge him generally in private, not in public. That I'm the chair, not the chief exec. The chief exec needs to be the public leader. My job is to try and help in private to facilitate that. And so you will find me publicly supportive of all of the, because that's my job is not to be a politician in this. My job is to try and chair the arm's length body. I know that's a wishy-washy answer I've given you, by the way, but that's what I should be doing. In private, and don't worry, in private, I think you can probably see I'm pretty straight talking. And I can tell you one anecdote, there's no sort of substance to it, but I pushed back on something that the Secretary of State asked me to do, this is 6-8 weeks ago, and he looked at me and said, I'm micromanaging you, aren't I? I went, yes, you are, and we moved on. And I will maintain that relationship with whoever it is as the Secretary of State, because actually I've got to demonstrate the same leadership behaviours I'm asking everyone in the system to do, which is to learn how to collaborate and find the common ground so that you need to get what you want to get done.
He's in a tough place as well because there's no time for legislation.
No,
there's no money. We don't call him the Tinker Man for nothing because all he can do is tinker. Right. Anybody else?
Sure, that's true, isn't it?
Got anything? Yes, sir. Far away. You'll be the last question tonight. We've waited all evening for this. It better be good.
No pressure.
I was struck by something you said early on about the way consulting firms interact. And you said that consulting firms are often only as good as their clients. Now, the NHS has been lambasted recently for actually spending a lot of money on external consultants, but those consultants appear to leave hospitals even worse off than they were before the consultants came in. Now, one of the explanations for this appears to be that the actual quality and capacity of NHS management is very, very low. We've got about 2% managers in the NHS, but the whole British economy is about 11% managers, which kind of suggests the NHS is actually very undermanaged. The reason why they use consultants badly is because the managers aren't good enough to use them well. But yet, the regulators and the politicians frequently say of the NHS that managers are just a bunch of parasites, they waste the money, we should spend that money on more doctors and nurses, not on managers. But how do you know where to spend the money if the managers aren't any good? What can the regulator, what can you do to actually elevate the role of management inside the NHS?
It's a really good question. I think that, again, bear in mind this is early days for me, so these are hypotheses that now I reserve the right to tweak and evolve as I learn. But what seems to be one of the most critical ingredients to successful transformation in the NHS is clinical leadership. So I think we need to have not just better managers, but we need broader management cadres. I'd love to see more clinicians in management roles. I'd like to see career paths where that genuinely works for those clinicians, whether they're doctors or nurses or other allied health professionals working their way through. I think that management is both a science and an art, and I don't think that this sector, not just the NHS but globally, is quite as up to date as maybe others are in thinking about that as both a science and an art. And it's hard to do. Leading people is ultimately, because you'll notice I'm switching to talking about leading rather than managing, because actually I think the leadership is the most important piece. The management processes are relatively easy to learn. Learning how to lead people is much harder. And I think that's what we've got to work out, how we do. And it starts at every intervention. And I'm quite, if I'm being really honest, quite shocked at the absence of some of the things that I would expect to see in the way that the system thinks about developing its leaders.
It's an interesting thing, just to pick up there, because you talked about Tesco's saying, you couldn't get a senior job unless you run a shop. And, we spend a fortune training doctors and then we give them a desk and take away the stethoscope. Do we really want clinicians in management, or do we want damn good clinicians giving us great outcomes and really good managers creating the time and space for good people to do great things?
I think you want both. I think that
That's
you need to have
fudge.
career paths. No, it's not a fudge.
It is a fudge.
It's like saying, do we want in our schools to have head teachers who've never taught? Well, some head teachers can do that, but do we want all teachers to not teach? No, of course not. So I think we need to create career paths that allow people to go backwards and forwards and to do both. Fundamentally, I do think we need more nurses and doctors in the system rather than more just pure managers. And I say that because I'm not a clinician. Actually, I start with a deep respect for them. But I love to see more engagement in management and leadership from the people who fundamentally deliver our service to our patients. And so that's where I would start from.
And where you would start from is probably a good place to finish. So, have you enjoyed your evening? Yeah. Wasn't that good? Can we say thank you? Now, regulars will know that we always give our guests a little gift. That we give away the best bottle of whiskey in the world. It's Welsh whiskey. It comes from Wales. It's the best whiskey in the world. Now, we always have a little joke about this because in a position like yours and members of Parliament and so on and so forth, you have to declare gifts above a certain limit. So on your register of benefits and whatever, you'll have to write on there that you've had a very expensive bottle of Scotch from Royal Italy because it's above the limit. And that always kind of, makes me laugh, really. That, some of the most important people in the health service are all, down to me for a bottle of Scotch. But the interesting thing that really buggered us up tonight is that Waitrose have got it on special offer. So it's below the limit. Thank you very much.